Hello, people. Today's class is going to be about the Fertile Crescent. You might wonder, is it a place? Is it an event? Is it an era? What does this mean, the Fertile Crescent? Well, this is a historical region that no longer exists. It included the Mediterranean Sea, or the land that bordered the Mediterranean Sea, Mesopotamia, and Persia. These are the key terms for today. Ziggurat, a temple tower. City-state, a city that governs itself as well as the land and people around it. Scribe, which is a person who copies information and keeps records. Caravan, a group of people and goods traveling together from one place to the other. Empire, many different lands brought under one government. Dowry, the property a woman brings to a marriage. Covenant, an agreement. Tabernacle, a shrine or place of worship, like a temple. Cuneiform, a form of writing using wedge-shaped symbols. And stylus, a pointed tool used in writing on a soft surface. Why do we call it crescent? Because it regards one of the phases of the moon, which is crescent. Look at the semicircle shape over here. You see? The meaning of Mesopotamia is the land between two rivers, right here, Euphrates and Tigris. Its origin dates from 7,000 years ago. And the main city-states are Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon. This is their social structure in the shape of a pyramid placed upside down. In this social structure, the farmers provided enough food for all. The artisans made decorated clay pots, blankets, rugs, and jewelry. The Sumerians built walls around the city. And the cities were divided into districts for every type of worker. Here is the social structure. At the top of the pyramid is the king, which is the upper class, right? The scribes, merchants, artisans, poets, and musicians were part of the middle class, and farmers and slaves were the lower class. This is a ziggurat. This is the iconic temple of the Mesopotamians. It had a shrine, which is located over here. It has a square structure, okay? And it has a couch and a table inside for the god or goddess who was the city protector. In the outside of the shrine, there was a decoration with bricks glazed in colors, especially blue, as you can see here. In the outer walls and ramps, there were some baked bricks for protection. It was like a fortress. Imagine the amount of heat that it took for those bricks to be made. Jesus Christ. And the inside of the ziggurat held grains, woven fabrics, and gems, which were offerings to the city god or goddess. These are the greatest inventions of the Mesopotamians. The first writing in cuneiform. You see? Cuneiform shape. It was carved with a stylus. And this is a soft surface made of clay. This is a caravan. Mesopotamia marked the beginning of the caravans. People and goods traveling together for many purposes. The sail of the boats was also created in Mesopotamia. They didn't depend only on the strength of the men, but also on the direction of the wind to move from one place to the other. That was pretty remarkable. The wheel. Imagine how many great inventions, even modern, parted from the wheel. It was a major invention in history. And this is the plow. Plow was a key invention as well because it was used to dig ditches on the ground in order for people to plant the seeds that were necessary for growing crops. Amazing. And this is one of the first alphabets made of symbols. So the beginning of writing is set in Mesopotamia as well. These are the empire builders. The first one is Sargon of Akkad, who swept down on the city-states of Sumer and captured them. He brought all of Mesopotamia under his rule. This included the present-day countries of Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, southern Turkey, Iraq, and much of Iran. He stopped fighting when he reached the Persian Gulf, but the empire lasted only 200 years because the Babylonians came along. They invaded Mesopotamia around 2000 BC. Hammurabi was its greatest ruler. He supported the growth of the arts in his kingdom. But the most remarkable legacy of Hammurabi is his code of laws. And now the city lies in ruins. It doesn't exist. After the Babylonians ruled came the Assyrians. They came from the north about 1300 BC, before Christ. They invented many tools of war, the short sword, the battering ram, and armor such as shields, helmets, and breastplates for the protection of the soldiers. They built fortresses on wheels, so the fortresses were able to move from one place to another. They controlled not only Mesopotamia, but also Syria, Phoenicia, the Kingdom of Israel, and parts of Egypt. But the empire collapsed in 612 BC. They were very involved in conflicts. They were warriors, you know? So in this eagerness for war, they started to decay, you know? And the Chaldeans came along. They live in southern Mesopotamia. They rebuilt Babylon and made it the capital of their new empire. And the Hanging Gardens, who was built by them, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was wonderful and beautiful. They made the first map of the stars, including constellations and everything. In 539 BC, they were conquered by the Persians. So the empire also collapsed. Let's talk about the Hammurabi's Code. This is the first code of laws ever created. Hammurabi was the most famous Babylonian king. The code was created in about 1780 BC, carved in a stone column. This invention set the basis for future constitutions in democracy. In the Hammurabi's Code, the punishment reflected the crime. For example, one of the laws established that if one person broke the bone of another person, the people of the city-state had the right to break the bones of that person. Imagine how savage it sounded, you know? But on the other hand, the Hammurabi's Code was nice and fair to women because a woman kept control of the dowry if she got married to a man. Yeah. And also, a woman could divorce her husband if he treated her cruelly. If that man wasn't nice to her, she had the right to get divorced. The Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were another group of people that lived in times of Mesopotamia. Their location was in the cities of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon. The transportation was in small wooden boats. And what did they transport? Well, their products, the lumber and purple dye. The purple dye was destined exclusively for royalty. In fact, purple color is related nowadays with royalty. But the most amazing legacy the Phoenicians left was the alphabet. The original Mesopotamian system of writing had over 900 symbols. And it was an obligation for all people to learn all the symbols. It was a very long process. The Phoenicians designed a writing system that included only 22 symbols. So it was easier to learn, easier to understand, and easier to build words and sentences. So if we now have 26 letters in our alphabet, as we know it, we have to thank them because they came up with the idea. Another group that existed at that time but prevailed were the Hebrews. Ancient people. Do you remember last class that we talked about the Hebrew calendar? That it began more than 3,000 years before the Christian calendar or the Gregorian calendar? Look at this. They are known as the Jews or Jewish. We know about their customs and beliefs from what is written in the Bible. It's true, the Bible is Christian or Catholic, but the origins of the Bible came from the Hebrews. The Hebrews accepted the idea of a belief in one God. They were the first people that believed in one God. The Promised Land. The story of the Hebrews begins with a man named Abraham. Abraham is involved in the story of the Promised Land that is included in the Bible. According to the Bible, God made a covenant with Abraham. Remember that a covenant is an agreement. God said to Abraham, "You worship me and only me, and I take you to the Promised Land." This Promised Land happened to be Canaan. His son Isaac and his grandson Jacob renewed the covenant and lived there for many years, and all the descendants as well. In the book of the Exodus, the Hebrews were enslaved by the Pharaoh in Egypt. They were forced to work in building projects such as the pyramids. And they were forced in a very cruel way, using whips, and stones as a way of punishment if they didn't obey the orders of the Pharaoh. It was very cruel. God told Moses, which was Hebrew, not Egyptian, to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt. At that moment, Egypt was ruled by Ramses the Great. They were raised as brothers because Moses was rescued from the Nile River by the wife of the Pharaoh, which was the father of Ramses the Great. At the end, the Hebrews escaped, and they crossed the Red Sea by a miracle of God. God was capable, according to the Bible, to open the Red Sea in two parts. And the Hebrews were able to go through those walls of sea. It was one of the first miracles, They entered the Sinai Desert, in which Moses received the 10 Commandments from God. The 10 Commandments that you learn in your preparation for the First Communion. They are still current today. There were two important Hebrew kings. King David, who was the one who fought against Goliath by hitting him with stones, in spite of being weaker and smaller than him. King David conquered the land that stretched from Mesopotamia to Egypt. He made Jerusalem the capital of his kingdom. Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel. His son Solomon, the one who held the mines with many riches, built Jerusalem into a great city. Its temple was a permanent home for the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark was the one that held the riches, the caves of King Solomon, the mines of King Solomon. That is a major legend, you know? But then, when Solomon died, the kingdom was divided in two. The 12 tribes of Hebrews divided into two kingdoms, Kingdom of Israel and Kingdom of Judah. And after returning to Judah, Hebrew scholars wrote the Torah, which is the sacred book for the Jewish. Know the Bible, the Torah. Okay? The Jews have continued to follow the laws and traditions of their ancestors. They didn't want to be influenced by Christianity. Okay? They have different beliefs, and that includes their calendar and ways of eating. For example, feeding themselves is pretty different for them. You know, they celebrate Sabbath on Saturday or Friday night. Saturday, Friday night. Shabbat on Friday night. They have a rite of passage called the Mar Mitzvah for boys at the age of 13. At that moment, they become men. And many others, of course. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the class, and I hope that you understood the meaning of Fertile Crescent. Imagine, agriculture and cattle raising was origined in Mesopotamia. Thank you. Bye.